state with criminal activities. Hard talks with the dealers in Yaoundé. More on that report with Haisencha.
With the prevailing crisis and growing crime wave in Cameroon, the Minister of Territorial Administration, Paul Atanganji, says arms have rampantly circulated in wrong hands with devastating consequences.
I wish to remind you that you are dealing with arms, which is a very delicate sector. You have to be extremely vigilant and avoid any contact with terrorists, highway robbers, thieves, criminals who can use fake documents to acquire arms or delicate weapons.
With the arms sold in 48 shops across the 10 regions, the president of the sector also reiterates the respect of the regulations put in place.
If we follow the law, we will limit it. At least we will ban these traffics.
Holding talks with the dealers on April 15 in Yaoundé, the Minat boss underlined that one of the control mechanisms is to double-check if the buyer is duly authorized by the ministry to purchase a gun or other ammunities.
If you receive any document coming from the ministry and you are not convinced that it is an authentic document, you just have to call our services for verifications. You should never be in a haste to attend to any customer if you are not convinced that the document which is being presented is an authentic document. We have a lot of fake documents.
Paul Atanganji insists that dealers who will not respect the warning will be dealt with accordingly. He also urged them to transmit the call to their collaborators to remain honest and patriotic citizens while doing such a delicate business.
This 2024, some 3.4 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance here in Cameroon due to the vulnerable nature of the populations of the Northwest living in the crisis region, a Northwest and Southwest region, and also the Far North region, and others like Damawan East regions. But unfortunately, only $371.4 million has been allocated to handle the situation by international partners. Koulibaly Siaka is a UN humanitarian coordinator. He comes back to their focus of attention this 2024, an excerpt put together by our reporter Beatrice Ngamo.
One of our focus will be on population affected by the crisis areas, notably the far north, the Northwest and Southwest, as well as the east part of the country. And for this year, our focus will be on 3.4 million persons in need. And also the target will focus on 2.3 person as target as vulnerable population on which we will be focusing this year. And the priority areas is really around our support those vulnerable people, particularly on access to school, access to essential basic services, to water, to shelter, and also all needs this affected population can have. And also jointly, the humanitarian community in line with national development priorities and needs, we are really ready also as the UN to provide the support to these vulnerable persons in need.
Human rights defenders and children's rights associations have sounded the alarm on the alarming prevalence of child labor in Cameroon, with children as young as 5 being exploited and pushed into slavery, often by their own parents, due to poverty, despite efforts to address the issue, including legislative measures and incentives. The problem persists. Let's have more in the following story. In Cameroon, the scourge of child labor has reached alarming levels, with reports of children as young as 5 being forced into work on the streets, exploited and even enslaved by their own families in the face of poverty.
we realize that we find them in the streets. We find the children in the streets, selling groundnuts, selling all sorts of things. We find them in plantations, and we find them in mines, like in the mines, like in Betua.
The situation is further compounded by the ongoing conflicts in the northwest and southwest regions, characterized by instability, destruction of livelihoods, and disruptions to education and social safety nets. Additionally, Boko Haram attacks in the northern part of Cameroon further contributes to the vulnerability of children to exploitation.
Term it an organized crime because it has to do with a middle person who gets to the family of the child and deceives the child by saying they're taking the child to town so as to give the child a better life.
Efforts to combat child labor, including legislative measures and incentives, have so far fallen short of significantly reducing its prevalence.
Our law was adopted in Cameroon, and in 2005 it was promulgated into a law on trafficking in children. We know that this law has become revised by 2011.
Globally, the issue of child labor remains a significant challenge, with an estimated 121 million children aged between 5 and 14 engaged in various forms of work. While there have been some moderate advancements in Cameroon, such as the identification and handling of children in mining, recent figures on the prevalence of child labor are lacking, making it difficult to assess progress accurately.
Apart from this gross ignorance that exists across the board, when I say gross ignorance, I do not only mean those who are living in the rural areas. I also mean that even those who are supposed to be combating
the persistence of child labor in Cameroon underscores the urgent needs for concerted action by government authorities, civil society organizations, and international partners to address the underlying causes and provide supports to vulnerable children and families. Over the years, watchdog entities like non-governmental organizations and global institutions, including the International Labour Organization, have decried the rising trafficking of children across Cameroon, while some of the victims are eventually smuggled out of the country into diverse forms of slavery. The bulk end up on the streets as vendors, minors, or prostitutes. Now, with the unending Anglophone crisis, there are fears the numbers are rising and rising fast. Tarike Divine Jr. comments on the phenomenon.
Every day, thousands of children across Cameroon are awoken, sometimes in the wee hours of the night, to embark on relentless hours of housework. Most times, these chores only end at around midnight. The bulk of the children, officially brandished as housemates, can only complain in silence. Literally, some of them were, quote-unquote, sold off into this masked form of slavery when they were only 6 or 7 years old. Amongst them are victims of child trafficking, which researchers claim is still very rife in Cameroon, despite being banned by December 2005 law. Elsewhere, the law prohibits the employment of children under the age of 18. Culprits involved in child trafficking face between 10 and 20 years imprisonment, plus fines ranging between 50,000 and 1 million francs CFA. Curiously, since the enactment of that law in January 2006, no sentence has yet been handed down to a parent or other persons guilty of child trafficking or exploitation. And so, in short, children across Cameroon are victims of tacit slavery and, in some cases, with the blessings of their very own parents who hand over their offspring to crooked operators from the big cities and other adventurers. The situation, according to observers, has steadily skyrocketed with the ongoing conflict across the English-speaking Northwest and Southwest regions. In fact, some figures indicate that as much as 90% of the inhabitants of Bamenda alone are victims of or directly involved in child trafficking. The captive children work in coffee, cocoa, and rubber plantations in the southern parts of the country, while others work as artisanal miners in the east. In the urban areas, they serve as street vendors, domestic servants, waitresses, or prostitutes for their bosses. And surprisingly, all these happen not in some dark, distant corners, but under the noses of law enforcement officers and administrative authorities. In fact, way back in 2005, the International Labour Organization reported that 600,000 children in Cameroon were victims of child trafficking for slavery. Yet, despite repeated denunciations, no one has so far officially faced the law for indulging in child slavery. And so it would be safe to conclude that the number of victims today runs perhaps to the tune of several millions.
And a class of students in the Advanced School of Mass Communication has marked yesterday a month they suspended from school for unacceptable behavior. The director of the school stated in his communique that only an engagement letter from their parents will bring them back to school, and other level 2 journalism students are respected this morning as they struggle to regain their places in class. More updates with our reporter Haisencha.
The level 2 journalism students of the Advanced School of Mass Communication were back on campus this Tuesday, April 16, 2024, after observing a one-day suspension by the director, Francois Marc Maison, for gross insubordination.
So it was mostly academic misconduct. So everything that dealt with students being rowdy in the class. We had some theft issues. Some devices were stolen. We were able to recover a couple of them. And so faced with those type of behavior on campus, we wanted to assess the situation and really make sure that the students understand that they're really stepping on a very thin line.
Regular absences without justification was also part of the suspension reason, and as requested in his communique, the students submitted engagement letters from their parents this morning before readmitted into the classroom.
La décision pour moi elle n'est pas due parce que c'est un rappel à l'ordre, parce que quand ça ne va pas, il faut toujours rappeler. Oui, les lettres ont bel et bien été rédigées et déposées auprès de l'administration.
So we resumed classes today. We wanted to make sure we send a strong signal to the students that they cannot just do whatever they want in class. They have to respect the authority of the campus. They have to respect the authority of their teachers, but they also have to respect the academic code of conduct. We were able to have discussion with them, and now that we have an agreement on the behavior that they have to follow for the remainder of the semester, class has resumed this morning.
The 120 future reporters pledged to scrupulously respect the rules and regulations or subsequently face heavy sanctions. The school administration reiterates that the action was a warning for the rest of the students to sit up and stick to the purpose which brought them into the prestigious institution.
Catholic bishops have joined a chorus by calling on Cameroonians to register on the electoral register. That's massively ahead of the 2025 elections. This is contained in the final resolution of their just ended 49 conclave. More with our reporter, Kejang Henry Atembe.
The president of the Episcopal Conference, Andrew Kier, has invited Cameroonian citizens to register en masse on the electoral roll in order to fulfill their civic duty in forthcoming elections. This is the message from the National Episcopal Conference, which brings together bishops of Cameroon. At this assembly, the bishops were concerned about issues affecting Cameroon's political, social, and economic landscape. The concerns include the slow implementation of the decentralization law, insecurity, the high cost of living, the rise of secularism, the desecration of sacred places, the uncontrolled exploitation of resources, and above all, the lack of interest in political issues. As Cameroon prepares for elections in 2025, the bishops believe the mass registration demonstrates the importance of civic engagement and participation in shaping the nation's future. The Archbishop of Bamenda, who is also the president of the National Episcopal Conference of Cameroon, insisted on the the aspect before going on to say that the electoral code should be reviewed to ensure healthy competition between candidates. While political parties are stepping up their registration campaigns, the Catholic Church is getting in on this act at the 49th Plenary Assembly of Bishops, which has just ended.
And meantime, political parties are bracing up ahead of the 2025 elections in Cameroon. One of them is Cameroon's frontline opposition party, the Social Democratic Front, the SDF, that train leaders of grassroots structures on political engagements. Our reporter, Saleh Sharifa, sat through the training. Her story.
Party for Africa. It was a groundbreaking training and capacity building seminar for leaders of SDF grassroots structures of Wuri electoral constituency on April 14, 2024 under the aegis of SDF Shadow Cabinet Minister of Communication and Media.
This seminar was organized this morning because the SDF want to be ready before the elections are called, because 2025 is not very far, and in this country we don't know exactly when elections are going to be called. There is only one man who has the agenda, that is the President of the Republic. So we have to work every day to call our militants, to teach them, to train them, to capacitate them, so that if even elections are called tomorrow, we shall be ready.
The grassroots leaders who were drawn from the 6 electoral districts of Wuri were politically drilled on local leadership, political engagement in the SDF, and on the socialist ideology.
The seminar is for a militant, like a mechanic for a car. That means when we try to entertain the flag of the party, we must make it with a militant who knows what he has to do. He knows the text of the party and he has the direction, the objective, the main skill of the party. Effectively, SDF the only party now. We train his militant normally and with a time, the time limited.
The leaders responded positively to the call by the party's hierarchy to be permanently on alert as Social Democrats at the eve of the 2025 electoral year.
And that's how we saw it on this edition of the Primetime Newscast, the English language on Canal, the International. Take another rendezvous, same time tomorrow. Good night.